Hello everybody, it's a Vertical Sandwich, and welcome back to Book Reviews. So today we actually have to do a non-Hugo Award winner. And the reason is because it's a Nebula Award winner, so we get to do an award-winning book. But the reason is, so let me just put these together here. Okay, so I have this, right? So this is the Mars trilogy. So there's Red Mars, Green Mars, Blue Mars. In that order. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Green Mars and Blue Mars, Hugo Award winners. Red Mars, Nebula Award winner, nominated for the Hugo Award, didn't win. So we're going to talk about all three. We're going to start with Red Mars, because Red Mars is Red Mars. It's book 1 of the Mars trilogy. So, okay. Discover the novel that launched one of science fiction's most beloved, acclaimed, and awarded trilogies, Kim Stanley Robinson's masterly near-future chronicle of interplanetary colonization. For centuries, the barren, desolate landscape of the Red Planet has beckoned to humankind. Now a group of 100 colonists begins a mission whose ultimate goal is to transform Mars into a more Earth-like planet. They will place giant satellite mirrors in Martian orbit to reflect light to the surface. Black dust sprinkled on the polar caps will capture warmth and melt the ice. And massive tunnels drilled into the mantle will create stupendous vents of hot gases. But despite these ambitious goals, there are some who would fight to the death to prevent Mars from ever being changed. Right. So, like, they get together 100 people, they put them on the ship, they send them to Mars, and the idea is they're going to colonize it. And the colonization of Mars is actually like this really. By the way, I was just looking at a butterfly over there. That's what's going on. You gotta remember, I got this huge just view of the middle of the woods here, and there's just stuff going on. So, here's the thing about this series, right? This book not in particular, but the series in general. So, Kim Stanley Robinson writes a very detailed kind of novel series about the colonization of Mars. So Red Mars, like the 100 colonists are landing there, and then they start these kind of projects to figure out how to, how to introduce plant life and how to warm the atmosphere, how to create an atmosphere that can sustain any kind of life, things like that. So the reason it's Red Mars and Green Mars and then Blue Mars is because large-scale water comes after, large-scale plants like mosses and lichen and stuff. Because I was trying to explain it to somebody I worked with, and they were like, well, it would be blue and then green. It would have to be. You'd have to get water before you get... And I'm like, yeah, but you get water before you get, you get water before you get oceans. I mean, just because you have plants doesn't mean it means you have water, but it doesn't mean you have gigantic bodies of water, right? Because there actually is a lot of... we know now that there's a good amount of water on Mars, right? Huge amount of water on Mars in the form of ice. So, anyway, but none of that is important. What's important is Red Mars is about the initial 100 colonists and kind of landing, building underground shelters, and then doing things like, building, their power stations and their greenhouses, and then the politics of that, and then eventually building, getting up to tent cities. They get up to tent cities. And this book is reasonably exciting that way. It's got like an in medias res kind of start, where it starts at the celebration of a certain anniversary in like one of these tent cities, and kind of stuff that happens there, and then it goes back and follows the first 100 colonists through landing on Mars and kind of everything that they do. And it's actually really interesting, the different personalities and kind of how things like that, how they work, who the people are who believe that terraforming should happen as quickly as possible. There's a woman named Anne who believes that Mars shouldn't be touched at all, and then there's these there's this kind of political anarchist guy, and then there's this engineering woman from I believe from Russia who is just kind of apolitical, and it's fun. There's a lot of really cool personalities in this book. So we're actually going to talk about them coming, before they even get to Mars. I'm just going to read a kind of section of them arriving. So, the red crescent grew to the size of a quarter, and the feeling of tension grew as well. as if it were the hour before a thunderstorm, and the air charged with dust and creosote and static electricity. as if the god of war were really up there on that blood dot, waiting for them. The green wall panels inside the Ares were now flecked with yellow and brown, and the afternoon light was thick with sodium vapor's pale bronze. People spent hours in the bubble dome watching what none among them but John had seen before. The exercise machines were in constant use, the simulations performed with renewed enthusiasm. Janet took a swing through the toruses, sending back video images of all the changes in their little world. Then she threw her glasses on a table and resigned her post as reporter. "Look, I'm tired of being an outsider," she said. "Every time I walk into a room, everyone shuts up or starts preparing their official line. It's like I was a spy for an enemy." "You were," Arcady said, and gave her a big hug. At first, no one volunteered to take over her job. Houston sent messages of concern, then reprimands, then veiled threats. Now that they were about to reach Mars, the expedition was getting a lot more TV time, and the situation was about to go nova, as Mission Control put it. That reminded the colonists that this burst of publicity would eventually reap the space program all kinds of benefits. The colonists had to film and broadcast what they were doing to simulate public support for the later Mars missions, on which they were going to depend. It was their duty to transmit their stories. Frank got on the screen and suggested that Mission Control could concoct their video reports out of footage from robot cameras. Hastings, head of Mission Control in Houston, was visibly infuriated by this response, but as Arcady said, with a grin that extended the realm of the question to everything, what can they do? Maya shook her head. They were sending a bad signal and revealing what the video reports had so far hidden, that the group was splintering into rival cliques. What indicated Maya's own lack of control over the Russian half of the expedition. She was about to ask Nadia to take over the reporting job as a favor to her when Phyllis and some of her friends in Taurus B volunteered for the job. Maya, laughing at the expression on Arcady's face, gave it to them. Arcady pretended not to care. Irritated, Maya said in Russian, "You know you've missed a chance to shape our reality, in effect." "Not our reality, Maya, their reality, and I don't care what they think." So, first off, you will love Arcady. Arcady is great. You'll like Nadia a lot, too. Yeah, how you'll feel about Frank and Maya and Anne and some of the other people are, yeah, okay. So, and I'm trying to, where did I just read this. Oh, and John. John is actually, so John is the first man who ever set foot on Mars. Like, he was the first astronaut to land on Mars, and then he ends up on this mission. So when they say, only John's seen it before, John's actually been to Mars and been back. So, the idea of colonizing Mars is great, right? It's a great science fiction idea. Super cool. Now here's the thing. So this is like a 570-page book, right? Tiny print. Tiny print. Tiny. Now, that being said, it's a good book. This is a really, really cool book. Like, the cliques they split into and the way they feel about each other and kind of the relationships they form, and then the kind of things that they carve out in their own, like, little spaces. Like, who is, like, Arcady and his group of, like, engineers take over the moon when they get there, like, take over Phobos and, like, start, like, they build a station there for people to arrive at when they get to the planet. And Nadia starts doing stuff like, I think tapping underground aquifers and stuff. Anyways, but they all like, and then like Anne starts, doing these kind of like these exploration missions where she goes off by herself and just examines like the rock formations and stuff. And you really get this feeling like, what people are interested in, and kind of the way that a society like this would work, like with 100 people. Where it really would, that they're like, certain people would retreat into the greenhouse and just work on the plants, because that's what they care about, growing plants on Mars. And some people would just go out and focus on the geography, right? Because they care about the geography of Mars. And then somebody would care about, building, the aerospace infrastructure for Mars tourists. And then, of course, there'd be engineers who cared. And so it's really cool that way about, like, the structures that they build and how they feel about the things they build and how they're kind of building the society, right? So, that is done really well. And this book is this book is enthralling. This book is really hard to put down. It's really cool. And the characters, there's a lot of really interesting kind of, back and forth going on between them, and kind of, I don't want to say betrayal, but like, there's just a lot of politics of opposing philosophies going on in this colonization of Mars. And the thing about it is that there aren't a lot of choices, right? There are 100 of them, and they're just stuck with one another, like, and what they have, which has all been pre-landed and stuff. And it becomes this really, this kind of interesting, the way that they argue, and then the kind of things that they do get done, and then the kind of things that they don't, and the things that work and the things that don't, and the fact that, it's not a fast process, and Mars is a desolate place. Like, that stuff's all really well done in here. And here's the thing, is I really liked this book. I picked this book up and went, like, this is going to be a hard sell, right? Because I think altogether, if you look at this entire series, like, this entire series is almost 2,000 pages, right? So it's 2,000 pages about the colonization of Mars. And you go like, well, that's a really hard sell, and it is. It is. It's a hard read. It's a very hard read. But Red Mars is a great read. Red Mars is a really, really addictive book, and or addicting book. And I really liked it, and I really would recommend it, because it's like I said, it's incredibly detailed, and it's reasonably fast paced, full of, you get to meet a lot of interesting people and care about them, and then a lot of crazy stuff happens in the early history of Mars. So like, this book is amazing, and like, this book probably should have won a Hugo Award, but it won a Nebula Award. And it was 1993 is the year I have listed for it being nominated for a Hugo. I don't know if the Nebula Awards matched up year for year then. I know earlier they didn't; they were 1 year off. But so yeah, so it was nominated for a Hugo in 1993. Didn't get it, but it did win the Nebula Award, and it's great. It's a great read, and I would suggest this to anybody. So now what we're going to do is, when we get to the next video, we're going to examine Green Mars, and we're going to talk about Green Mars, and there'll be spoilers for Red Mars. So just so you know. So when we come back, the book 2 of the Mars trilogy. Bye, everybody.